Hello there, unlearners. Welcome to this episode of the Unlearners podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here back around the fire together around a conversation about how we learn, change, and grow, and how to make that a personal culture so that it's who we are and we lean into every opportunity to transform and to be the next best version of ourselves. Today's episode is no different, packed with goodness, lots of learning, lots of unlearning, lots of challenging how we see things, but more especially aligned to the very theme of this particular season, which is all around education, rethinking how we learn, rethinking what the curriculum looks like, and whether it's best shaped for how individuals actually transform, or whether or not that's actually what is getting in the way of the process of learning and transforming. But this episode, specifically today, is about why changing your mind is actually the way smart people do things. And I've got someone who I think is a smart person to join in on this conversation. Musa Kalenga is the CEO of Brave Group. And when I heard that, Musa, I just thought, oh my goodness, I love that. I love that you would entitle the entire group, besides just the work that you do, everything, as brave. And I actually just wrote down one of my favorite quotes by Edmund Burke. And he says, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And when I saw the title of this episode of your group, it made me think that really it's the unlearners, it's the brave, it's the courageous that need to do something in order to change who we are. So before we even get into the nitty-gritties of today's conversation, talk to me about the value of bravery when it comes to changing your mind.
The unlearners. Learn, change. Learn, change. The unlearners. The unlearners. Learn, change, grow.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a great conversation to be having, especially at this time in the world. And bravery as an idea is a double-edged sword, right? Because it's kind of one of those things that when you do it well, it works extremely well. But also, after doing it a lot consistently, it's a conviction that you can't let go of, right? And so it puts you in very uncomfortable situations. We talk about bravery, about being discomfort. And every single time we look at either our client base, if I look at where I'm at in my life, if I look at the people that are around me, I always ask them that question, whether they're uncomfortable enough to be feeling comfortable with being at the Brave Group. And to be honest with you, most human beings aren't, right? So most human beings aren't wired for discomfort. So I've got a full appreciation that it actually provokes people to be in a constant changing state of adoption, of exploration, of curiosity. And that's why unlearning and learning becomes so important. But at the same time, as I said, it's a double-edged sword, because if you're always in that constant state of learning, unlearning, and relearning, it is really difficult to feel settled. And so for those that choose to be the brave, they're constantly in motion. And we like to believe that we're one of those.
I like that. Yeah. That's so inspiring. It must be so great to work at the Brave Group. I think that's where I belong. I like that. I think it's so inspiring when that becomes a way of being, right? And I think that's what you're talking about as you introduced. It's the idea of building it into who you are. Yep. So brave is not just something you are. Unlearning is not just something you do. Yep. But it's who you are, right? Absolutely. And I think that's when the real change happens. What do you think?
Absolutely. It has to be who you are. I mean, I think because you're being asked continually to shift things, because you're being continually asked to change disposition, points of view, understanding, you have to make peace with the fact that it's not going to ever be the same. Now, my experience has been fortunate that I've worked with people who I think embody that and who've been able to achieve phenomenal things. And a lot of entrepreneurs and front runners, as they call them, a lot of them have that baked into them. And when they find something they're passionate about, it's easy to do. But it's difficult to scale that kind of thinking into an organization because, you have to also appreciate that some people are there just to kind of clock in and clock out. And when you have people like that within the context of an organization like ours, it does feel quite jading because you've got a group of people that are sold on reinvention and on thinking and on pushing. And then, unfortunately, because of the dynamics of numbers, you've got some people that aren't. And so finding a place for those people within an organization has also been quite tricky because bravery bravery can take many different forms. Bravery can take the form of doing new things continually. Bravery can also take the form of challenging existing things and trying to reinvent them. And so trying to carve out a space for everyone to kind of adorn their bravery in a way that's natural and authentic to them is really what's quite hard to do. But the invitation is there. The invitation is there. Yeah.
And maybe let's get a little bit practical then around what that looks like and how you build, because this is the thing. There's one part of it this is the culture, but the other part of it is that people understand how to execute in that way. And this is the thing we have at the unlearners as well. We say, learn, change, grow, one to our clients, one to our audience and our unlearners community, but also as an organization. But the most important thing I find, Musa, and I'd love to hear how you're pulling it off, how you are implementing it, but also what our unlearners can do to just build that in, is having some kind of a framework, having some kind of almost like a checklist. How do you know when you are showing up in that way? Is it something you can do? Maybe you're about to start off on a new task and you're going, how do I show up courageously? How do I show up as brave? How do I become the kind of person who changes my mind in this situation? How do you usually teach people to do that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Multi-layered question. But the starting point is that you have to have a way of identifying that there's something that is actually wrong. Because I do know of many situations where people just change for the sake of changing, which I also think is incorrect. So your starting point is that you have to have some definitive evidence of some sort that says something is wrong, that requires a change, right? And when you have that evidence, I think it gives you a directional indication of what you should be doing. So in an organization like ours, and I'll reference advertising, marketing, and communications industry as an example, there's been a lot of data indicating that things are wrong. There's been a lot of data indicating that we're not transforming at the right speed. There's been a lot of data indicating that the models traditionally, commercially, are not working anymore. Clients aren't willing to pay massive retainers over 5-year periods. There's been lots of data that says clients over time are wanting far more agile businesses, smaller teams, more specialized teams. So the data has been quite obvious, and I think what has happened is when you see data being presented to you over and over again, you either look at it and you go, it'll pass, or you look at it and go, we need to do something different. And so the step 2 is the data is presented and it paints a very clear picture that something has to change. Then we took it upon ourselves to try and figure out, all right, well, within the context of what the data is saying, how does our organization fit into this picture? And that's an internal reflection, right? It's being able to hold up the mirror very candidly and say, all right, based on these 5 things, we're guilty of 4 of them. And we have to be cool with being guilty of 4. You can't ignore them. We're guilty of 4. As soon as the organization understands that that's what they want to change, then you can have a very razor focus on trying to fix them. Because the 4 things that you're guilty of doing that clients really want you not to do, let's start with 2, let's start with 1, whatever the number is. Let's just start with 1. And in our case, we realized that we wanted to be faster and more agile, right? Clients are asking for organizations that can be more responsive. So we said, okay, let's choose 1. Let's choose agility. Let's choose speed. And because I'm a technologist, my background is technology, there's a wonderful intersection with what's happening with artificial intelligence and marketing. And so we said, well, let's use this technology that's emerging to solve for this particular problem that the data has given us. And then you start really experimenting. So you develop, cohorts or individuals that can work on projects to try and solve for that very thing. And with singular focus, you'll be surprised how quick you can kind of get to a point where you figure stuff out. And once you figure those things out, what's really interesting then is how you then convert that into scalable value, is how you then say, okay, cool, we're now doing things quicker because we realize that that's a problem for our clients. We underwent the process of changing. Now we've figured something out. The thing that we figured out is not mainstream yet. So even to our clients, when we tell them the thing, they kind of look at it and go, what are you trying to do? Even for people in our organization, you tell them the thing and they go, what are you trying to do? And in our case, the thing was reduce the time it takes you to go from brief to ready to go to market by 90%. That was the thing.
Wow. So
when I tell internal teams, you're going to have to do this thing 90% faster, they go, it's not possible. We tell this to our clients, they go, why would you do that? Because we build on hours, right? So it actually means you're killing yourself, basically. So now you've solved for this new thing, but now you have to get everybody to understand that it's going to be the way the world works. Then there's a massive internal amount of work that gets done to help people understand that change. Because you're shifting the paradigm of billing people per hour to billing for value. And that's a huge shift.
Yeah.
It's I mean, in the creative space, you'd think it would be easier, but it's actually worse in the creative space because creatives love the ability to take their time to craft and build and finesse. Yeah, I think I'm in the right company here. And so when you tell them you have to do it 90% faster, just kind of everything short circuits because that's not how they get to the point of creating quality.
Yeah.
So that's been a huge challenge in terms of getting people to understand and journey on that on that trajectory. But slowly but surely, by introducing them to what we are giving them back, right? So it's not we're taking away from you. It's what are we giving back to you?
Yeah.
And so I've had to position it as we're gifting you with time, right? If you can do things 90% faster, it means that the things that you shouldn't be doing, hopefully we can get a better way of doing, and therefore I'm going to give you more time to do the thing that you should be doing, right? Which, according to all the information, is being more human, being more plugged in. Being more inspired, being all those other additional things. So that's really the process that we went through to get to the point where we're at now. I think the high level principles are the same, even when applied to your situation. Got to have data that says there's something wrong. Based on that, you figure out what you want to fix first. You start experimenting with certain things. Use that to be able to scale your behavior, and then hopefully you can make a change. So I think the principles are very similar.
Oh, yes, definitely. And I like that you recapped them as well, because I would love to go back to maybe just a few of them.
Sure.
One of the things that I really enjoyed as I was listening to you is the value focus.
Yes.
Because when anyone is in a position to change their mind as a creature that creates all of these defaults to high function, which is the human being, changing your mind is, are you sure right now, really? And you're really looking at it, literally, this is how the human brain works. We're looking at the cost benefit consistently. What's going to kill me? What's going to help me survive? Yeah. And often when someone says, hey, it's time to change your mind because you're presented with contrary evidence to what you think or what you have known the market to be, all of a sudden, like you say, there's that short circuit moment that goes on. Yeah. But when there is clear value, and I love that you use the word clarity there, clarity of value, but also just clarity in what needs to be done, because then it gives a sense of safety, right? So we know that safety is pivotal for anyone that's in a position that needs to change, because they need to feel safe.
Absolutely.
The reason why you're so fearful in the change space is because there isn't certainty.
Absolutely.
And what they say is if you can't give certainty, you give clarity, because clarity helps to bring that psychological safety that people have. So I love that process that you use and where you started off, and then you go to experimentation. So I want to go there.
Yeah.
With experimentation, what have you found? So someone's going, okay, Musa, I understand this process, and I would love to jump into a place in my life where I can consistently be experimenting and trying and iterating on a consistent basis, because this is how you build that capacity for mental agility, right? Is you just every now and again just push something a little out of the boundaries. I always say start with something small. Change that one plant in your living room that's been in the same corner for 10 years.
Just shift a little bit.
Move it around. Every now and again something small. So what are the parameters that you use with your clients, but also just with yourself around experimentation? What are some of the guardrails that you put around that?
Yeah. So I think experimentation, it's a muscle which I think is severely underused in many instances in professional industries, because to the point that you're making, people invest in business models. Business models deliver predictable results. Yeah. So experimentation kind of goes against the grain of what most organizations are set up to do. It's set up to be predictable. So when you add this idea that I'm going to experiment and do something unpredictable, that fundamentally is almost a virus to the organization, because it's the antithesis of why it's there. So for me, it's important that in the process of establishing ways to experiment, you should try and identify people that have got high appetite to do it in the first place, because otherwise you're pushing a barrel uphill. I was very, very fortunate in our case. There was one particular lady who actually worked in client service, and effectively, I started speaking about this world of AI and what was happening, and she just caught it. Like I didn't have to, everyone else kind of had to sell them on it. Something just landed in her. And she decided for the next 3 months she's going to learn everything about AI. She didn't even tell anybody. So she went down the rabbit hole on her own. And she found out all these things and she learned all these things. And when she came back and we had another conversation, I realized that this individual had just gone and made themselves completely immersed in this world. Wow. So if you can identify people like that, it helps, right? Because she then became the custodian of the project in terms of trying to understand how this can create value for our clients. Because she had already given an indication that she's interested in it, because she's already in our space, adding this additional lane that created excitement and innovation and value was actually a wonderful thing for her. She was also, fortunately in a place in her career where she was kind of trying to do something different and find. So I think that I was very lucky in that regard. But the first step I would advise is if you can find those kind of people who are a little bit unsettled, who are a little bit, more curious than others, who are, have an appetite to try something. It's not everyone who has that. And if you can get those early nuggets or those early kind of pioneers and get them into a room, those are the best kind of people to experiment with. Number two, once you've gotten someone or a group of people like that together, then you create the guardrails. And the irony is that even in experimentation, you need the freedom of a very tightly defined brief, right? So the guardrails are quite clear. We can't do the things that we did yesterday. We're giving you a sandpit to do whatever you need to do for tomorrow, but these are the three things that you cannot do, and these are the three things that you must achieve. So that kind of specificity really, really helps when it comes to experimentation. Because one of the key things you have to prove in an experiment that, your hypothesis was either confirmed or contradicted. Yeah. So the more specific you are, the easier it is to go, we actually achieved the thing. So in our case, the experiment was, number one, can we go from brief to production ready in half the time? Very clear to define. If time was 10 minutes, we need to do it in 5. The second thing is, can the quality of the output at the end be indistinguishable by a human being? Right. So those are the two things we're experimenting for. And so when you set up the experiment, you've got people that work in there with two very clear things they're working towards. It's phenomenal how quickly people orientate towards solving that problem. And what I thought would take, months, they were able to achieve in weeks because there was just clarity of what they needed to do. And with our clients, it's very similar. I think with our clients, once again, you've got clients that some marketing directors, CMOs who are highly, highly innovative, highly, highly experimental. And then you've got others who aren't, right? And, what's been fascinating about trying to do pilots with different clients is that you can tell the ones that get it and you can tell the ones that don't get it. Yeah. And that's also okay, right? Because you've got early adopters for a reason. So find the ones that get it. And, if you don't have a number of them in your organization, at least try find one or two clients, even if they're not paying you right now, try and find people that get it and do it for them. Do it free if you must. And through that, you prove the point and you demonstrate value. Once you get to that point, then it's all kind of downhill from there. So that's really a very clear way in which you can experiment. And then last but not least, the incentive around an experiment is to be able to create something special. So once you've been able to prove, tick, in our case, we can reduce time significantly, and tick, it's indistinguishable by human beings, then you can start to really scale something quite interesting. And people who have been part of that process will appreciate what you're trying to solve for. So that's the beauty of getting experiments right. Then you can get them wrong, right? So you could be halfway down the line and the time is not, we're not reducing the time. The output's just not looking better. Then people do what they call pivots, then you try something new, if that's the requirement. And you should always be open to that, because in an experimental context, that's always a reality. The reality is always, tools down, let's do something different. It's just not working. And in the case where it's working, then, continue to scale. Yeah.
And you never really lose with an experiment, right? No. Because there's learning there. And this is why we've titled this episode, Why Smart People Change Their Minds. Yeah. It's because just that process of going back and iterating is invaluable in the learnings there are there, in the constant shift, in who you become as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've worked in in many contexts with young people, and I love working with young people because it keeps me very very nimble. Yeah. And I remember one project we did when we started a company called Bridge Labs, software engineering business that actually still does engineering and has built our technology now. We got together a group of about 6 young, kind of 19, 20-year-old African engineers from the university. And I spent about 6 months with them. And in that 6 months, it was kind of like a bit of an interview, but an internship. So I was trying to establish character and that kind of stuff. And so my goal was to engage them, quite spontaneously. And part of how I engaged or how I used to engage spontaneously was I used to send emails out with thought starters, right? So I'd send if I'm running in the morning and I think about something, I'd send a quick thought starter email. Hey guys, could we try experiment with ABC? And I used to do this often, but I'd never get a response, right? And I thought it was just so bizarre because I thought to myself, I'm trying to collaborate, I'm trying to innovate with you guys, I'm trying to, let's do this thing. But never once I got a response. And I asked them, I sat them down, I said, guys, I'm always sending you guys innovative emails, one-liners in the subject matter. And they said to me, Musa, when you send us emails, it's almost like if you received a letter in the post and you asked people to innovate using a letter in the post, how would you feel? And I said, you're actually right. That generation does not innovate with emails the same way we did. Gen Zs and the rest of us old folks who like Microsoft Outlook, like you send yourself one-line reminders. I can tell I'm in good company here. But that was kind of where you sparked a conversation or you sparked something. This generation just doesn't work that way. Emails are such a formal way of communicating that it feels isolating when you send them. So my intention is pure. My intention is good. But the format I'm using is completely wrong. Now, for me, that was like a wow. In my mind, everything shifted. Because I thought to myself, how many opportunities have I missed to actually engage in a way that can create value in our transaction or our engagement with these young people on the basis that I'm using an outdated piece of technology to communicate to them. And so that means I had to shift everything about the way I communicated. I mean, we created a whole new policy about emails. From that day going forward in that business, I never used emails to communicate to people. We used WhatsApp groups, Asana, Trello, Monday. They're like these kind of very interactive platforms, which is great because they're kind of the line between work and play is very, very thin. And so they want to feel as though they're having almost a social experience when they're working. So I had to change it about myself. And in so doing, it's wonderful how you realize the dynamism of communication, because then I shifted into this world of kind of one-way emails to dynamic, like almost every platform is on all the time. It was a weird thing in the beginning. So you're on Trello, then you go from Trello into another platform, then you go from another platform into email, then back into Teams. And so you're kind of in this constant kind of dance between technologies, which was completely normal for them. But for me, it was a shift. But once I got the shift, I came super proficient in it, and I'm a bit of a problem now because I can do it quite well.
Yeah.
But to the point, you have to get to the stage where you realize that what you're doing was not sufficient to the task at hand. You have to make those changes, and the discomfort you journey through a little bit. But then when you get into it, you actually become a far more competent individual, I think.
Yeah, and you surprise yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because initially you would have thought from the version of yourself that you are, with the parameters that you're in.
Yeah.
And just true to this season, Musa, I have a background as a primary school teacher. And one of the subjects I used to teach is natural sciences and technology.
Yeah.
And at the time we used to teach, as children were working on their experiments, we used to teach the scientific method.
Right.
And the scientific method says that when you have a hypothesis, you don't prove it by seeking to prove it.
Yes.
So you don't go out and say, I've got this thing, in order to prove that it's true, let me go and interview all of the people who already know that it's true. Instead, I go out and I find contrary evidence.
Yeah.
And when I don't find the contrary evidence, that's how I know that my hypothesis is true.
Yeah.
But this is what we do, right? And true to this conversation, what we do oftentimes is, this is how I see the world. This is how I think. This is what I know works for this business, guys. This is how we do things here. And then I go out and I can even in an organization rally the people who believe like I do.
Correct.
And creates a little mini hub in the company that says, we're not going to change. We're not going to evolve. We're not going to transform. We're not going to change our minds because this is the truth. Rather than the other way around, and this is what I'm hearing you say,
Correct.
is the other way around is probably the best, not just for our organizations, not just for our teams, but for us, for the world, for the global community, is going out and saying, what is contrary evidence and how do I, one, identify that it's time to change, it's time to unlearn, it's time to be brave. And then how do I experiment in a way that feels safe, that's gradual, but also that brings about those learnings for me as well.
Absolutely. And the problem now in this world that we live in is that, as you said, it's easy to seek out evidence that confirms your beliefs, and social media has made it 1,000 times worse. Because you design an echo chamber that's reinforcing the stereotypes, biases, whatever you want to call it, that you may have. And that becomes such a true truth to you, right? And because of that, it is even worse to shift you from your disposition. Whereas this discipline from a leadership point of view in seeking out the contrary is actually something that I don't think a lot of people spend time doing. I'd always been very curious about the alternative, like, yes, I think this way, or yes, I do it this way, but what if I tried something else? What would happen? I remember always having that level of kind of conscious awareness to know that there's a way I do it, but there must be another way to do it, right? And I was very lucky because I was exposed to multiple environments when I was younger, so it kind of almost became a normal thing. But I definitely see that it's a struggle for many people, especially if you've achieved success off the back of the thing that you are now understanding to be the way things work, right? It's even worse when you're in that position. because your success is a direct correlation to the thing you know. Now you're asking me to change the thing that created the success.
What do you mean?
Yeah. It gets a little bit confusing on that regard. And the world that we're in now is throwing us such curveballs that, what got you here, as they say, won't get you there. And so leaders are really struggling with that principle. I think a lot of employees in our business that were really great at one skill, and I say to them, that's good, but learn other skills so that you can diversify. They're like, but no, I've won awards for this skill. I've been recognized for this skill. I'm like, yes, I hear you. You should have a foundational attitude that is the foundation of what you need to do, and you need to move into other things. That's the only way you can defend against the future that we're encountering. So the challenge of the bias and the mental, I think, almost jail you can put yourself in because of your bias, really can restrict you from learning new things. And if you don't have the ability to identify that you have to learn new things, then it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge.
Yeah. Oh, this has been just absolutely profound. I wish these interviews could go on all day. If it was up to me, we would just get coffee, sit here, talk all day. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of time. And I think I want to close this conversation off, Musa, with understanding from you what the biggest unlearning is that you are finding leaders have to step into in the context of changing their minds more often. And I want to create a little bit of context for that just by saying that, and you touched on this so well already in this interview, is that we often call unlearning and relearning the meta skill. Because if you look at anything else that you become, that you learn, your capacity, like you said, to let go of what you thought was right, or even just to self-disrupt, right? And to challenge who you thought you were, how you thought the world was, is really the underpinning of learning anything else, is the underpinning of stepping into any new environment, meeting a new person. It's just your capacity to, as a coach of mine once said, think about what you're thinking about. Just be the kind of person who can step behind your own head and go, are you sure about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that really the truth? So what are you finding as we close off this conversation today? What's the one thing, as leaders who are listening, leaders that are watching, individuals from your team and your network that are going to see this, what's the one big thing that if they can do to start off their journey of changing their minds and experimenting just a little bit better? What's the one thing they need to unlearn? Gone are the days where we can say, oh no, soft skills are not a priority. Let's focus in on knowing what we're doing. Because if your team doesn't quite understand how to show up, then whatever technical skills they have really are not going to make the difference. So go over to theunlearners.com or email our team at programs@theunlearners.com to schedule a quick call with me, Zanele Njapa, the Unlearning Lady, to have a conversation about which key skills your team is looking for right now to supercharge your success going into the next decade. I can't wait to work with you.
I think if we can figure out a way to trick ourselves to believe that we don't know the answer, right? Because as a leader, as a successful individual, the default is that you have the answer. Because people seek that out from you. People come to you every day with problems. People come to you every day. So the default is that I have the answer. Now that over time becomes your disposition. And for you to unlearn, you have to trick yourself into thinking that you don't have the answer, because that then makes you inquire and inquisitive and exploratory about what could the answer be. Now, what's interesting is that AI and technology is brought us closer to that. Now you can honestly approach a subject as not knowing anything about it. But in a very short period of time, with curiosity and a tool, you can understand a little bit more, right? So you can know nothing about physics or chemistry, which is true. I know nothing about physics or chemistry. I can go and sit with Grok, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whoever it is, and with just asking the right kind of questions, inquiry, I can know a bit about it in a short period of time. Now, if you ask me about things that I know well, I'll say I won't need to go to the technology because I know how to build brands, I know how to do this, I know how to do that. Already closing myself off to inquiry and exploration, because there could be a new way to build brands. So in a long-winded way, if there's a way we could trick ourselves into not having the answer, it would give us an easier way to explore, to try and find new solutions. So the thing that I try and do to hold myself accountable is every time I feel like I'm about to click into solution mode, I try and just not say anything. And I try and just listen, because I try and take input from everybody and hear. And sometimes it's difficult because people are not used to giving input. But I catch myself before I give the solution, because I'm very quick to get into solution mode. And then I go back and I go, okay, I don't know the answer. Let me listen. And on that basis, it helps to keep myself accountable. I'm not saying it works every single time, but it helps keep myself accountable to the desire to continue to learn. So that's the one thing I would advise.
Desire to learn.
Yeah.
Curiosity.
Absolutely.
Is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
I like that. It resonates so beautifully with what you were saying, especially around how everyone is going to be different. And we all jump in a little bit differently. I mean, we have a quiz that we call Find Out the Kind or the Type of Unlearner You Are. Okay. Because not all unlearners are created the same. Some of us will jump right in. Some of us are a little bit more cautious. Some of us need hardcore evidence. And I definitely encourage our unlearners to go over to the description of this video or of this audio and take that short 2-minute quiz to find out what kind of unlearner you are. Because very much like Musa said, this is the starting point to go, okay, I understand what I need to experiment. So if I'm the type of person that needs just the guardrails to be there, then maybe let me just help myself to get there. But if I'm the kind of person that's just like, you know what, let's just stand back, everyone. Then I know that about myself. And it's that self-awareness that then unlocks the curiosity and allows that part of me to actually start to be set free. Yeah. Musa, wow, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, and all the best unlearning. It's a tough but rewarding journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I like that you said tough, because we need to just be honest.
Yeah.
All right, unlearners, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Unlearners podcast. It's been such a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Like I said, don't forget to go over and take that short, sharp quiz. What kind of unlearner are you? So that you know exactly what your self-awareness levels are, how you jump into any opportunity to learn, change, and grow. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you next time on the Unlearners podcast. Bye for now.
The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow. Learn, change, grow. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. The Unlearners. Learn, change, grow.